And we are back. I'm Thorn, and this is the Game Design Lexicon. If you're new here, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button here on Twitch, or give us a follow over on YouTube if you want to see these videos after the fact. And we were talking about objective reality while we were moving logs. And what got me on this topic? It's kind of weird. It's not as much religion these days. I'm fucking through with religion. I'm tired of talking about it. Tired of wanting to know anything about it that I don't already know. Which unfortunately is a fucking lot. Anytime I get on a topic that I want to understand, I learn everything that I can about it. History, context, you name it. But what has me on the topic of just objective reality these days is in the breaks when I take on these streaming hours of streaming, I tend to read the news, the daily news, and a lot of my stuff, unfortunately, a lot of it has a left-leaning slant, because it's kind of hard to get neutral sources. There's all sorts of... There's that new service that's been advertised on a lot of the channels that I watch, where you can look at the leanings of the sources that you get, but a lot of what I read just seems to be kind of on the left side, because the right side is... unfortunately, it's just turned into propaganda. It's filled with lies and delusion, and I don't really know how to deal with that, in the sense that it just goes against what I know is objective reality. It takes a second for me to debunk most of these articles, and even worse, in a lot of cases, I can. So I've even gotten to the point to where there's a lot of at least, I mean, I guess they're not as far left as I go, but a lot of left-leaning news, especially YouTube channels, like a lot of the people in the Young Turks network, that I don't really like watching. I mean, first off, they're, social democrats, so they're still capitalists, which I don't really give a shit about. So I don't really want to watch their shit when it comes to that stuff. But even worse is the fact that there's a lot of sensationalism when it comes to titling stuff, and it drives me away. It drives me away really hard. So and so owned, or so and so shamed, or whatever, to the point to where it's just they do it because they want to get the clicks from YouTube, and I don't really want to. I don't really want to. It's like you read it and it's like, no, this person wasn't eviscerated. Why do you call it eviscerated? They weren't. It was just a rebuttal. Why can't I have news that accurately describes what happened? So most of the news I end up reading is AP news, because they're about as close as you can get to the old, like, Walter Cronkite school of newscasting. PBS is actually always pretty good too. From what I understand, those guys are based out of the Walter Cronkite school of newscasting, which is an actual thing. But my problem is I think what really started it with me was my mom. She was one of the early Tea Party adopters, and I had a hard time dealing with the whole our president is not a citizen thing. And because, it was demonstrably a lie. Even if you went by laws of probability, it was a lie. Exclusionary clauses in the Constitution are followed very strictly. And in my opinion, there's almost no way that somebody could get elected under a under a static exclusionary law, such as age or country of birth of origin. And it's just not going to happen. It's the way that they vet those people. I mean, not to mention on top of that, I mean, come on, the dude was not born in Kenya, and it was pretty obvious. Oh, what did I miss, X-Band? Whenever somebody says, the Bible says, my brain is wired to hear the same thing as, yeah, and I'm the same way. So one of my favorite topics of study is like esotericism and religious history. I love reading about the wacky shit that we used to believe in and the origin of religion. And to me, it's extremely funny that a lot of, like, one of the things that a lot of people don't realize about religion these days is that your religion is tailored to your culture. And that's pretty obvious by, even now that we're so global of a society and anybody can travel anywhere. The Christians are still in one area, the Muslims are still in another area, and the Hindus are still in another. It's pretty still fairly sequestered. And if you're born in a certain part of the world with certain parents and in a certain culture, then it is almost likely that you're going to be born of that religion. Which is very telling as to whether or not religion is a very human thing rather than a divine thing. And what's even more fascinating about that is that it's not necessarily just a geolocational thing. It's also a temporal thing. In that the religion that people believe in today, let's take Christianity, for example, or even better, American Protestantism or evangelicals or, any of the numerous, like, over 10,000 flavors that you can get of Christianity here in the United States. Even if you go to a religion that is... for lack of a better word, Luddite in nature, like the Mennonites or the Amish, right? These are still very modern religions. They're modern in the fact that they reflect modern principles as they see them, and that they do not hearken back to the days of earlier religion, because when you start to learn the history of religion, you start to learn how unbelievably different it is today than it was 100 years ago. When you hear Christian nationalists say, this is a Christian nation and it always was a Christian nation, one of the things that they fail to realize is the few Christians that our forefathers were, because not all of them were Christians, but the ones that were Christians were not the same type of Christians they were. I mean, not even close. The religion was nowhere near what theirs is today. And honestly, if those people saw the religions of today, the Christianity of today, they would probably think it was downright insane. Just the same way that when you look back at how they practiced religion, you probably would have thought it was a little bit wacky. And, it gets worse as you go back. The further you go back, especially when you get back to proto-Christianity and all that sort of stuff. Let's see. Hate bait, yeah. Matrix creation. So I don't do much reading these days, especially when it comes to that stuff. Most of what I get from YouTube. My attention just isn't what it used to be. So right now I'm currently reading a book on game theory. And I've been reading it now for about 4 years. So if that tells you how quickly I'm moving on books. Speaking of which, I can't suggest it more. It's a book called The Rules of Play. Game Design Fundamentals, and it's a really awesome book. Again, can't suggest it more. It's hard for me to get through them these days. But As far as definitively making the case about how religion-based stories are allegorical, that's really easy. You just go back to Judaism. The Jews, almost none of the Jews, look at their religion as prescriptivism. It's all allegorical. So, they don't look at it like Christians do. None of the sects of Judaism think that, any of those stories are historically accurate past what we can prove. They're very realistic about their religion. But if you know enough about religion, you can see where a lot of these stories came from, previous religions, really. Now, the idea of a Messiah born of a king, son of God, all that stuff. I mean, it wasn't exclusive to Jesus back then. I believe, who the hell said this? I can't remember. I think it was Richard Harris or one of those guys. Richard Harris? Sam Harris, that said that it was more like Monty Python's Life of Brian back in the day of Jesus than it was, like you saw it in the Bible. There were just messiahs right and left, especially when it came to Jewish apocalypticism. And yeah, I know you can get a lot of that stuff from watching one of my favorite, most of it is. The entire Old Testament is, and that's the bulk of the Bible. The newer parts are kind of interesting in the sense that it's interesting in what they decided to include in the New Testament and what they decided to not include, being that, again, it was found on Jewish apocalypticism, and they decided to exclude things like the doctrines of the Gnostics, which were a form of apocalypticism. It was, and they, I think one of the reasons why it's apocryphal is because the Gnostics looked at God as more malevolent than benevolent, and that's, when people ask me why I would never believe in religion, because I would never believe in religion, it's actually a really easy question to answer these days, because my question for them, if they asked me why I don't believe in religion, to answer a question with a question, it would be, which one? And if they say Christianity, I would say, well, which one? It's like, well, Protestantism, which one? Well, American Protestantism, well, which one? Currently, there are over 10,000 sects of Christianity here in the United States. So, which one? And how would I know that it would be Christianity and not Muslim or Hindu or Shinto or Buddhist? And truth of the matter is I find a lot of interesting and useful knowledge and definitely some beneficial philosophy in all of these religions. But as you said, the Bible is one big plagiarized book, and it's more. It's even when I just discounted the Old Testament as not being plagiarized, it is. Because a lot of the Torah is taken from previous religions, Babylonian. The Ten Commandments. A large portion of the Ten Commandments are taken straight from Hammurabi. It's all just evolved, which makes it. Being that it evolves like society evolves, it makes it even more like human, you can see it. It's like anthropological sociology. It evolves just like we evolve, and that was my point to begin with. Is the religion of today is absolutely, Christianity of today is absolutely nothing like the Christianity of our founding fathers of our country, of the Christianity of medieval Europe, of the Christianity of the early forming of the Catholic Church, or the schism that created the Orthodox Church. I mean, these are all vastly different religions, but they're still Christianity. So, which one? Which one? I mean, it's pretty obvious that they're based on the cultures that they evolve around. That, American evangelicalism is very like American exceptionalist, nationalist based Christianity. I mean, it's not Christianity. I mean, in the sense of the original religion, not anywhere close. So, but even with religion, I mean, again, I've dismissed religion years ago. I find it fascinating learning about it. Again, Esoterica is the channel on YouTube. Dr. Justin Sledge. I would suggest going through all of his videos. They're amazing. Probably as amazing as the book that you just suggested, Xpan. They teach you about basically the mystical side of our religions. Things like alchemical practices, demonology, which, if you remember, Charlemagne was a demonologist and a Christian, which is kind of weird. But really interesting stuff. And the fact that a lot of the stuff that modern Christians would consider demonic were things that Christians, 1,000 years ago, thought were pretty much common practice and things that they needed to learn. So, pretty amazing. Anyway, the point that I was bringing up about objective reality was the ideas that, back in the day, my mom decided to move over to the Tea Party movement, which was kind of disappointing because, let's see, must be clear of any objects. So let's start off by moving this away. I know I'm going to end up having to strip these logs, but I want to see what I need to make it. And the fact that our political system, one of the reasons why it seems the right side of our country tends to take advantage of religious people is because they're easily taken advantageable. They can pretty much, what's the old saying? Anybody who believes in impossibilities can be convinced to commit atrocities. And while it's not that extreme, I still find it amazing that the older I get, the more the right side of our country is steeped in conspiracy and mysticism and other like semi-believable bullshit. And it's one of those things that kind of got me started on the path of objective reality. When somebody says that Bigfoot exists, how do you know that he doesn't really exist? When somebody says the Loch Ness Monster is a real thing, how do you rebut that, So because of those, I started getting into, how to determine objective reality from subjective reality, right? So subjective reality is everyone's own perception of reality. Objective reality is essentially the only thing that it can be for us, and that is the reality agreed by everyone, at least on a consensus, which is kind of scary in the sense that, most of the people in the world are religious, so why don't I believe in religion if that's the case? And that's because objective reality gets more complicated than that. You have to take into consideration the educations of the people who are subscribing to it or critiquing it or whatever. It's all a matter of finding authority when it comes to knowledge. Reagan's amnesty program. Oh, yeah. Yeah, Reagan is demonstrably a horrible, horrible person. But then again, really, pretty much every president that we've had since, I don't know, like, shit, dude, 1920s, maybe, has been a war criminal. Ever since the whole neo-imperialism started, with capital exploitation of specifically for us, South America was a big one. But Reagan, yeah, Reagan was a very specific type of criminal because he's the one that started the entire path of the Republican Party down American exceptional mythology, and basically reopened the path of white supremacy that had been quelled in the 1930s by the socialist movements that were abound at the time, and that were able to bring things like the New Deal. But he hit the rewind really. So Reagan was essentially the racists' reaction to the civil rights movements in the 60s. I mean, you have to remember that up until the 1960s, black people really weren't citizens. People who weren't white and male weren't really citizens in this country. They didn't have the ability to do everything that anyone else could do, and they were, pretty much being held back from being equitable on their own, whether it was a female, even if they were white, or anyone that wasn't of, Northern European descent. So, yeah, he hit the rewind. And I think Trump pretty much, from Reagan up until Trump, it was dog whistles. It was, you can be a racist, but only do it by, using analogies like welfare queens and immigrants taking our jobs, which of course they never have been. But now that Trump is around, he's basically mirroring the words of Hitler and taking us into new levels of fascism. And that's actually the challenge that we're going to hit for a while. The whole implication that I had earlier about violence in our country is the fact that now we have to worry about late stage capitalism, and late stage capitalism is a very dangerous time for any society because let's see. So I need logs, 6 logs. Split, and so late stage capitalism has a habit of developing into fascism. So when capitalism fails, because of course the upper class is extracting both labor and resources at a rate that's unsustainable, and it causes massive inflation and massive unemployment. Then you get, the upper class who doesn't want to take blame for it. So they blame it on, disenfranchised people, minorities, immigrants, the Jews. I mean, it's been a case throughout history. You can pick up a history book and you can read that pretty much every fascist government has been formed through failed capitalism. Okay, so let's strip these logs, huh? Carve a trunk into a log. I'm only a bit tired here. Oh yeah. Well, and that's because you got to remember that earlier adopters of the internet were the intellectual crowd. The only reason why I was on the internet as early as I was because, my dad was an electronics engineer, so I was raised on a PC. We had personal computers in the early 80s, which meant I was on the local bulletin board systems that were in my local area before the mid-80s. And I had started exploring the internet in 1989, before the World Wide Web even existed. when the internet is mainly intellectuals, it reflects the demographics that intellectuals normally, and racism is often not included in that. So it basically wasn't until the internet was made by everybody that it started to reflect the demographics of everybody. And one of the things that you realize about the world is that, even though slavery is gone in the United States, and even though we had the civil rights movement, one of the things that a lot of people don't understand about World War II is with the rise of the Nazis in World War II, there were an extremely large portion of the United States that was supporting the Nazi Party. Because, of course, the Nazi Party, despite having socialism in their name, was very anti-socialism. One of the first things that the Nazi Party did when they came into power was disband, imprison, and execute all the socialist movements that were in their country. And on top of that, they were into racial purity, and even better yet, they were into white racial purity, which is still very alive and well in our country. And you'd think that in our society that would be gone by now, but it isn't. It isn't even close. And I personally don't really even understand it anymore. I don't understand how stuff like that exists. I mean, especially when it has been, objectively proven that race is a social construct, that people who are racially different from you are more different in culture than they are in genetics, that it has literally nothing to do with your ability. It has everything to do with the privilege that you have of where you were raised and the discrimination that you suffer in where you live. So, yeah. Yeah, no, the way I put it is, how about the People's Democratic Party of North Korea? Do you really think North Korea is a democracy? Because it's in the name. It's in the name, so they must be democracy. How about the People's Republic of China? Do you think China is actually a republic? Because if so, you'd probably be mistaken. One of the main reasons, and again, you can pull up a history book and you can read about this. One of the main reasons why the Nazi Party included socialism in their name was to essentially capture the hearts of their people. They wanted their people to think that it was a social, that they were more for a socialist style political party, which they weren't. It was literally failed oligarchs seizing capitalist enterprises and divvying them up amongst those oligarchs. It was basically the same, a very similar thing to what happened with the illegal dissolving of the Soviet Union. Basically, a bunch of rich people got together because there were a lot of socialism going on in Germany at that time. They seized a lot of the property of these places and distributed it amongst the rich people. And it's funny that a lot of us are forgetting all this stuff, or that we're having to suffer through a large amount of revisionist history, because there's very few portions of our history that are as well studied as World War II was. World War II, last time I was talking to my psychiatrist, one of the things that I had to mention to him that he was kind of unaware of, which is really funny because I love the history of my field. You'd think that everybody that was in a field would love the history of their field, but he didn't realize that the psychiatrist industry, the psychology industry, basically all of that, anthropological sociology, that hit a exponential growth after the fall of the Nazis, because we wanted to figure out why the fuck that happened. So there's literally no portion of history. That's one of the reasons why, when you're not watching Ancient Aliens on the History Channel, it's a World War II documentary, because there is literally no portion of our history that is more studied than World War II. Period. Full stop. And for anyone to get that wrong, for anyone to get that wrong is just unbelievable. The whole contention that the Civil War wasn't about slavery is laughable, because all of the declarations of secession of the states that seceded, we have those. Those are primary historical documents. We have those, and we have the proof in those that the reason why they seceded was over slavery. So if it wasn't about slavery, why did the people who seceded write it in their declarations? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense why people would want to. Oh, and one of my favorites lately was that slavery had its benefits. They learned carpentry skills. It's like, no, you don't understand. There is no, what was I watching the other day? Somebody was talking about slavery in the Greek and Roman times, and how slaves were treated fairly well back then. And it's like, wait a second, no. Anybody who would say that slaves were treated fairly well doesn't understand what slavery is. Just straight up does not understand, because you can't treat a slave well. The idea of being a slave is being treated unwell. And anything else, any other justification that owning another human being can be anything other than a bad thing is absolutely deplorable and should be completely condemned. It's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. And the worst part is, and one of the reasons why I'm not a capitalist and why I'm not religious, is because both capitalism and religion were the driving forces behind slavery. Period. Yeah. So, pet ownership's a bit of a weird thing for me. There are a lot of domestic animals that basically wouldn't be around if we didn't keep them. And until we actually find a way, because of course our dietary needs are met by omnivorous diet. I don't like animal ranching. I'm not a big fan, and if I had the willpower to be, vegetarian, I would be. But as far as owning pets, I mean, I don't really find anything wrong with, animal companions. That's been a staple since before we've had history, So I don't really believe in the viewpoints of like PETA, who believes that all animal, ownership is slavery. I don't really necessarily think that some animals are worse off being wild than they are being cared for by us. But, when it comes to a sentient human, somebody who has the ability to make their own choices, I think it's a little different. Just a little different. Not much, but a little. But I understand people's viewpoint when it comes to that. I just don't, while I do feel strongly about animal cruelty, I don't think I could ever give up my pets, period. I believe that, but, there is a line. For example, let's give a good example here. The house that I currently live in, my sister has a lot of cats, to the point to where I think the amount of cats that she has is unhealthy to our family and unhealthy to the cats, because I don't think she can adequately care for them. I try and keep my mouth shut about that because, who am I? I'm freeloading off of her right now, so who am I to really mention that? But I do firmly believe that you know, the amount of pets that we have around this house is excessive, and that it's detrimental to their life as well as ours. So there is definitely a limit. If a human can't take care of a pet, which seems to be the case time and time again, organizations like the ASPCA wouldn't exist if they weren't basically dealing with the ills of society and some humans' inabilities to actually care for the pets that they have. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I love animal sanctuaries. They're some of my favorite YouTube channels for sure. Um, but yeah, as far as exploitative natures, like I never really liked things like dog racing or horse racing or any type of sport um, that these animals are made to participate in. But you know, caring for animals, in my opinion, is just fine. But exploiting them, I don't really think is. What was I doing? Building a wooden building. Let's see if I can build this corner here, or at least start on it. Look at that. Okay, you have all the necessary stuff. Oh, oh, oh. Yeah, take a break. I am now tired and fatigued. And I think it's time for a break. I may go ahead and end it. And as philosophical as I'm feeling, it is a bit exhausting. It was at one point in time. It was initially programmed in. It was initially released in 1992. It's currently in the Guinness Book of World Records for being the longest actively developed game. So it's been in development since 1992, actively until today. Yeah, so it's currently Windows based, but there's a lot of contentions about it. Like, it doesn't really scale all that well. You can tell I'm running it in a widescreen format, which it isn't really made for, so my squares are a little wider than they are tall. It's probably one of the best roguelikes I've ever played because it's a sandbox roguelike survival, and there's not a lot of those out there. So, really awesome game. Really awesome game. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and call it quits for the day. Go ahead and eat some lunch and other stuff. And it's been fun, X-Man. I like talking with you over this sort of stuff. It's definitely one of the things that interest me today, and I don't have a lot of people that I can talk to about it because a lot of my views are very contentious and very offensive, especially about religion and politics. As a matter of fact, it's kind of funny if you look at the front of my Twitch page. I'm starting to kind of decorate it with anarcho-syndicalistic. I can't even fucking say it. Anarcho-syndicalistic imagery, which is kind of funny. When people ask me what my political beliefs are now, my go-to explanation is, you ever see Monty Python and the Holy Grail? And the one scene where King Arthur comes upon that peasant on the road and is like, "Old woman!" And the guy's like, "Man, oh, man." It's like, "And I'm not old." "Really?" "Yeah, I'm 32. "Really?" "And my name is Dennis." That scene, the type of government that peasant is describing is my political leaning. He's an anarcho-syndicalist, which is funny. So most people don't get that. Anyway, but then again, that's my ideal government. I don't really think that's achievable in any realistic fashion, especially in today's world, with the shit minds that most people have these days about their politics and what they want, and the fact that we have a large portion of the United States that actually wants somebody like Trump as their leader makes me know that my idea of the ideal government type is just not possible. I wish, dude. Unfortunately, my last girlfriend, one of the reasons why we're not even friends anymore, is because she decided that she wanted to be a bigot. And I can't handle that. So she decided that trans people just don't need to exist, and yeah, I can't deal with that. I can't deal with that. That's yeah. And the last blow up that we had was basically her saying stuff about a portion of our population that are currently being legislated out of existence, that are existing in a stage 7 genocide in our country, which you know, most people who are against those people don't really understand that, you know, the next stage is they start getting arrested and possibly executed. So who knows? Who knows how that'll end up? I guess we'll see. We'll see. And to me, it's just the same shit that the Christians have been throwing at the LGBT community the entire time they've been around. It's just the same shit, just another extension of it. So yeah, that was her viewpoint on it, is that she didn't want to deal with them in the bathroom. She didn't want them in sports. She didn't want them all sorts of other stuff. So I don't really talk with any of my exes anymore. Every single one of them I seem to have a problem with, but then again, that's not saying much, since I seem to have a problem with anyone that I talk to for any extended amount of time. Anyway, on that wonderful note, if you happen to make it this far in our broadcast, it's time for station identification. My name is Thorn, and this is the Game Design Lexicon. We'll be signing off. If you are enjoying what you're seeing, by all means, give me a follow here on Twitch. I now have a new follow note. Have you seen this? X-Band? Check this out. I got a new little follow thing. You're going to love this. Let me see if I can pull up my alert manager here. Boink. Let's see if that actually works.
Game Design Lexicon thanks you for following us.
How's that? How's that for a follow message? Of course, my little box is like alphaed out, so you can barely see it up there, but... So I've actually gotten around to making some media. I even got my new puppet pretty much 90% running, and I'll be able to transition back to a VTuber soon. Anyway, make sure you give us a subscribe here, follow over on YouTube, which I post all my content, which is getting old over there rather than letting it fall off over here. And I will be on maybe tonight with some more Cultist Simulator, and certainly next week, starting Monday, back with some, what were we playing again on Monday? Dark Cloud on the PS2. Anyway, thank everybody for joining us, and have a wonderful, wonderful weekend.
Game Design Lexicon thanks you for following us.